The Fat Man Bomb. In 1942, a young scientist named Harold Agnew held a small container that would forever change the course of human history. Here we see 21-year-old Harold Agnew, holding the plutonium core of what would become known as Fat Man. The nuclear bomb later dropped on Nagasaki. The core itself packed almost 21 kilotons of explosive power, equivalent to over 21 billion calories. Cher Ami, the Pigeon Warrior who saved 194 lives. During World War I, a brave pigeon named Cher Ami emerged. The story takes us to October 3, 1918. Major Charles White Whittlesey and his men found themselves in a desperate situation, trapped in a small depression with German forces surrounding them. After losing many of their original numbers, 194 soldiers remained, with no safe way to communicate with their allies. After 2 pigeons were shot down attempting to deliver messages, Cher Ami became their last hope. Despite being shot through the breast, losing an eye, and having her leg severely wounded, this bird flew 40 kilometers in just 25 minutes to deliver her crucial message. The first heart transplant in Poland. An image captured by James Stansfield shows Dr. Zbigniew Religa monitoring his patient's vitals after performing Poland's first heart transplant, a 23-hour surgery. In these images, we can spot Dr. Religa's exhausted assistant sleeping in the corner, while the surgeon himself maintains his vigilant watch over the patient, Tadeusz Zytkowicz. What makes this story even more remarkable is its long-term success. Zytkowicz survived for 30 years after the surgery, outliving Dr. Religa himself. A quarter-century later, Zytkowicz would pose with this very photograph. The world's oldest film. Back in 1888, Louis Le Prince created something revolutionary, the world's oldest surviving film, called Roundhay Garden Scene. On October 14, 1888, in Whitley's Garden in England, Le Prince and his family became the world's first film stars without even knowing it. The footage shows them simply walking around the garden, his in-laws, Sarah turning around, and Joseph's coat flapping in the wind. Le Prince used a special camera with just one lens and filmed it on Eastman Kodak's paper-based film. Franklin D. Roosevelt's childhood photo, 1884. You're looking at a young Franklin D. Roosevelt, who would later become America's 32nd president. In this photo, we see little Franklin at just 2.5 years old, dressed in what was completely normal boys' clothing for that time. Before the 1900s, young boys wearing dresses wasn't unusual at all. In fact, from the mid-1500s until the early 1900s, all young boys wore dresses or gowns until they were about 8 years old. This practice was called breeching. The moving apartment building. In 1987, something unbelievable happened in Romania. They moved an entire apartment building, with all its residents still inside. During Romania's communist era, the city of Alba needed to build a new boulevard, and one of these buildings was in the way. Instead of tearing it down and starting over, they came up with an amazing solution. They would just move the whole building. First, they split it into 2 parts. Then they dug underneath it, put down railway tracks and wheels, and slowly moved both halves about 180 feet away. First-class air travel in the 1930s. If we stepped into an airplane in the 1930s, we'd find something that looks more like a luxury hotel room than today's packed planes. Way before modern jets, there were special planes called flying boats that carried wealthy passengers to Hawaii. These planes could only land on water, but they made island hopping possible in ways that had never been done before. By the 1920s, these flights had become the best way to see the Hawaiian Islands. These flying boats could fit 8 or 9 passengers in pure luxury. The birth of McDonald's. In this 1948 photo, we see Maurice and Richard McDonald standing in front of their very first McDonald's restaurant in San Bernardino, California. The McDonald's story started in 1937, when Patrick McDonald opened a simple food stand called the Airdrome, selling hamburgers for just 10 cents. 3 years later, his sons Maurice and Richard moved the whole building to San Bernardino and renamed it McDonald's Bar BQ. By late 1948, they noticed most people were just ordering hamburgers. So they closed down, simplified everything, and created a new menu with just the basics: hamburgers, cheeseburgers, French fries, shakes, soft drinks, and apple pie. And the rest, as we know, is history. On March 31, 1848, residents near Niagara Falls woke up to silence. The mighty waterfall had stopped flowing. By 1848, Niagara Falls was essential to local life. People used water wheels to power their mills and factories. One night, a farmer noticed something strange. The usual thundering sound of the falls was missing. The next morning, everyone discovered the falls had completely dried up. They learned that strong winds had pushed huge chunks of ice to the edge of Lake Erie, creating a massive ice dam that blocked water from reaching the falls. The giant Nazi soldier. In 1944, a photo captured an unusually tall German soldier, Jakob Nacken, who stood at an impressive 7 feet 3 inches. Before the war, Nacken was a circus performer known as the Giant from the Rhineland. He had even appeared at the 1939 New York World's Fair. When war broke out, he was drafted into the German army at age 36. After the war, Nacken moved to America and returned to show business, performing as Santa Claus and appearing in Ripley's Believe It or Not. Kim Il-sung's hidden secret. For nearly 2 decades, Kim Il-sung, North Korea's great leader, carried a secret, a large calcium deposit growing on his neck. The growth started in the late 1970s, appearing on the right side of his neck close to his brain and spine. Though it wasn't cancerous, doctors couldn't safely remove it. As it grew to the size of a baseball in the 1980s, hiding it became increasingly difficult. North Korean photographers were ordered to only photograph his left side, and all official photos were carefully edited. The Apollo 11 heroes in Mexico. Just 9 weeks after walking on the moon, the Apollo 11 astronauts visited Mexico City as their first stop on a world tour. Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins received a welcome as exciting as their moon landing when they arrived in Mexico City. This visit initiated an incredible 39-day tour that would take them through 24 different countries, sharing their historic achievement with the world. The mummy trade. In 1865, you could find an unusual sight on Egyptian streets, vendors selling actual mummies. The story behind this strange picture began with Napoleon's conquest of Egypt, which made Egyptian artifacts available to Europeans. Soon a bizarre trend emerged. Wealthy people hosted mummy unwrapping parties where they'd gather to watch ancient mummies being unwrapped for entertainment. The 33-horse harvester. In 1902, an incredible sight appeared in the Blue Mountains where 33 horses were working together to pull a massive harvester. This picture shows a special harness system that helped the horses share the weight evenly as they pulled the heavy combine through the fields. Most impressive was the skill of the mule skinner, the person controlling all 33 animals with just 2 lines, guiding this powerful team through their daily work. The first woman photographed. In 1839 or 1840, Dorothy Catherine Draper sat for what would become one of the earliest photographic portraits of a woman in history. The photo session happened in her brother John William Draper's New York studio. To make the photo work, Dorothy's face was covered with flour to create a better contrast in the sunlight. She had to sit completely still without blinking for 65 long seconds. Prayer in the Nursery. This 1888 photograph by Jacob Riis opened America's eyes to the harsh conditions in New York City's slums. After the Civil War, Many immigrants from Southern and Eastern Europe and Asia came seeking a better life but found themselves living in terrible conditions. The upper and middle classes had no idea how bad things were until Reese's photographs showed them the truth. Building the Eiffel Tower. In 1887, construction began on what would become Paris's most famous landmark, the Eiffel Tower. Built from 18,000 pieces of wrought iron, the tower cost about $1.5 million at the time. That's around $44 million today. Here's an interesting fact: the tower was supposed to be temporary and was scheduled to be torn down in 1909. But city officials realized it could work as a radio telegraph station and kept it standing. Now it's one of the most recognizable monuments in the world. Young Queen Elizabeth. In this 1944 photo, we see 18-year-old Princess Elizabeth, later Queen Elizabeth II, writing at her desk in Windsor Castle. 8 years before she became queen, this photo shows Elizabeth as a young princess, already preparing for her future role. She would go on to become Britain's longest reigning monarch, serving for over 70 years, the second longest reign of any sovereign ruler in history, and the longest of any female monarch. The 1924 Miss America. Ruth Malcolmson won the 1924 Miss America title in a much simpler competition. The Miss America pageant started as a small event in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Ruth Malcolmson, who had previously won the title of Miss Philadelphia, competed against more than 80 other contestants, the largest number in the pageant's history at that time, and claimed the crown at just 18 years old. The birth of an iconic movie intro. In 1928, MGM captured its first lion roar, creating one of the most recognizable symbols in cinema history. From Hollywood's golden age to today's digital era, that majestic roar at the start of MGM films has become legendary. This moment in 1928 came at a time when movies were just starting to include sound. While the final product has thrilled audiences for almost a century, creating it was no simple task. It required careful planning and innovative technology to capture that perfect roar. And with that last photo, we have come to the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to hit the subscribe button for more awesome videos just like this one. This has been Timeless Photos. Thanks for watching.